They informed me my role was being eliminated due to a company restructuring, Julia declared, her eyes fixed on her tablet. I, Donald Thompson, a man of 65 years, had dedicated nearly 2 decades to the operations of Blackwood Industries, a manufacturer of high-quality industrial equipment that once thrived under family ownership before outside investors took control. 19 years spent diligently maintaining their financial records, ensuring every single entry was flawlessly accurate. This sterile conference room, with security personnel subtly positioned nearby, served as my unceremonious farewell. "Your security badge and parking pass, please," Mark stated, sliding a cardboard box across the expansive table. "Security will accompany you to gather your personal effects." I offered a simple nod, suppressing any urge to protest or plead. My gaze rested on Julia's impeccably manicured fingernails as they impatiently tapped against the polished surface. "Any final thoughts, Donald?" Her tone hinted at an expectation of tears or a dramatic outburst, a performance designed to ease her conscience, I suspected. "No, thank you for the opportunity," I replied calmly, my voice steady. I rose, straightened my tie, and secured my leather briefcase, a gift from my late spouse 17 years prior, before her valiant struggle with illness, before I submerged myself in spreadsheets and quarterly reports as a refuge from the crushing silence of our empty house. "Human Resources will contact you concerning your retirement package," Mark announced, placing pointed emphasis on the word retirement. We both knew I was 4 years short of qualifying for full benefits. Kevin, the security guard, appeared uncomfortable as he escorted me to my office. "Sorry about this, Mr. Thompson," he mumbled, as I carefully wrapped a picture of my beloved wife in tissue paper. "It's all right, Kevin," I reassured him, a comforting hand on his shoulder. I left my access card on my desk, but kept the briefcase close. Inside resided a USB drive containing meticulously documented evidence spanning 3 years. Unusual vendor payments, questionable electronic fund transfers, and abruptly canceled audits, all scrupulously recorded. Julia and Mark believed they were discarding an old-fashioned accountant who asked too many questions about the newly inflated consulting fees in departmental budgets. They were unaware that I'd been quietly documenting everything since Julia's inexplicable loss of vendor verification paperwork, and since Mark had begun systematically removing anyone who dared to question the new executive spending policy. As I walked through the reception area, my former colleagues pretended to be engrossed in their shoes. 19 years of unwavering dedication had culminated in a cardboard box and averted gazes. Only upon reaching my vehicle did a restrained smile grace my lips. They thought I was departing empty-handed. In reality, I possessed everything they desperately wanted to remain hidden. My skepticism wasn't always there. My initial 15 years at Blackwood had been fulfilling. I joined when the company was under the direction of the elder Frederick Blackwood, a man who personally inspected product quality each morning before his first cup of coffee. "Numbers don't lie, Donald," he'd often say. "People do. Your role is to ensure our figures reflect the truth." After Frederick's retirement, his offspring sold the company to investment groups. Subtle shifts followed: minor cost-cutting measures, cheaper materials, longer intervals between equipment maintenance, nothing overtly alarming. Then came the rebranding, a new executive team, and a bold new corporate vision. Julia arrived from a global firm known for its aggressive acquisition strategies. 6 months later, Mark joined, preaching the tenets of corporate cultural evolution. I initially gave them the benefit of the doubt, until the first quarterly review under their leadership. "These vendor payments don't align with our received inventory," I pointed out. Julia smiled, a purely predatory smile. "We're changing suppliers. It'll balance out." It didn't. My subsequent emails went unanswered. Then came the lavish executive retreats, the exorbitant consulting fees paid to firms I couldn't locate in any public registry, and financial reports filled with duplicated charges that were mysteriously approved. I started my own record-keeping, creating a parallel set of books, the authentic ones, and backing everything off-site. Not from any preconceived plan, but because Frederick's words resonated within me. Numbers don't lie. The workplace changed drastically. Younger employees with ties to Julia or Mark received promotions. Staff were reassigned or subtly encouraged to retire early. Robert from procurement visited my office after discovering invoice discrepancies. "Something's wrong, Donald," he whispered. 2 weeks later, Robert was gone, dismissed for purported performance issues, according to the official announcement. My daughter, Jessica, noticed the shift in my demeanor. "You're working late every night, Dad. What's going on?" I couldn't bring myself to confide in her. Jessica had just become a partner at her law firm. She didn't need my problems added to hers. I simply lied, claiming it was merely a busy period. But last month, when Mark reorganized the finance department, placing his unqualified nephew between me and all executive financial approvals, I knew my time was running out. So I made copies, secured the evidence, and constructed a meticulous record of every questionable transaction and policy change that weakened financial controls. Not for revenge, but because someone had to uphold Frederick's teachings. Numbers don't lie. The full weight of my situation hit me as I pulled into my driveway. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, I had no commitments for the next morning. No reports to review, no month-end closing to prepare. I sat in my car, staring at my front door, my home feeling unfamiliar, somehow tainted, even though nothing had visibly altered. I placed the cardboard box on the kitchen counter and poured myself a generous amount of the whiskey I kept for special occasions. This certainly qualified, though not in the way I'd imagined my career ending. The telephone rang. It was Jessica. "Dad?" she asked. "Brenda from accounting just called. She said you were let go. What happened?" I gave her a sanitized version. Restructuring, position elimination, standard corporate jargon. "That's absurd," Jessica retorted, her legal instincts immediately engaged. "They can't do that after 19 years without sufficient cause. We should file—" "No," I gently interrupted. "No lawsuits." "But Dad—" "Trust me on this, Jessica." I took a slow sip of whiskey. Some battles aren't fought in courtrooms. After the call, I went to my home office and powered up my computer. The USB drive from my briefcase contained everything, organized by date, incident type, and monetary value. 3 years of financial manipulation, meticulously documented with supporting materials. I opened a new document and began typing. Not an angry letter or a threat, but a concise, factual account of my observations. Times, dates, amounts. The email addresses of the Securities and Exchange Commission and the District Attorney's Office were in the recipient field. My finger hovered over the send button. Was I really going to do this? These weren't simple spreadsheet errors or innocent mistakes. This was intentional financial wrongdoing. People would lose their jobs, potentially face criminal charges, and Frederick's legacy could be tarnished. I closed the laptop without sending anything. Instead, I found myself examining a dusty photo album. Pictures from Frederick's retirement celebration, the old team, my late wife beside me at a company picnic, both of us younger, unaware of the illness silently growing within her. "What would you do, Mary?" I whispered to her photograph. I already knew the answer. Mary never tolerated dishonesty. "Do what's right," she would have said. "Everything else is just noise." I slept poorly that night. By morning, a transformation had taken place within me. The fog of shock had lifted, replaced by a chilling clarity. This wasn't about my job anymore, not even about me personally. It was about Frederick's legacy, about the wronged vendors, about the employees who would ultimately bear the brunt of executive greed. I made coffee, adjusted my tie out of habit, and picked up the phone. "Richard, it's Donald Thompson. I need to discuss some financial irregularities at Blackwood Industries." Yes, it's extensive. Can we meet today? Richard Peterson had been my college roommate. He was now a federal prosecutor specializing in white-collar crime. The first move had been made. 3 days after meeting with Richard, I received a certified letter from Blackwood's legal department. Their generously offered severance package required my signature on a confidentiality agreement that would prevent me from discussing any aspect of the company's operations, past, present, or future. The monetary amount was insultingly low, 3 months' salary for 19 years of service. I contacted Jessica for legal advice. "They're worried about something," she said after reviewing the document. "This goes far beyond standard non-disclosure terms. What happens if you don't sign? They're threatening to contest your unemployment benefits and withhold payment for unused vacation time." Her voice hardened. "Legally dubious, but they're betting you won't have the resources to fight it." I thanked her and promised to consider it. What I didn't reveal was that I'd already made my decision. Later that afternoon, my doorbell rang. Julia stood on my porch, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Donald," she said warmly, as if we were old friends, "may I come in? I wanted to personally check on your well-being." I allowed her into my living room, but offered no refreshments. "The severance paperwork," she stated, placing a fresh copy on my coffee table. "There was a misunderstanding. We can offer an additional 2 months' pay if you sign today." "What's the urgency?" I inquired, maintaining a neutral tone. Her smile tightened. "The board is finalizing next quarter's budget. We need to settle all outstanding financial obligations." "Like appropriately compensating vendors?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. A flicker of something, fear, perhaps, crossed her eyes. "I'm not sure what you mean," she responded smoothly. "The Peterson invoices," I stated carefully. "The ones that appeared in the system without corresponding inventory receipts." "Clerical errors," she responded smoothly, "already addressed." "And the consulting payments to Zenith Partners, the company that shares an address with your brother-in-law's home office?" The room temperature seemed to plummet. Julia's smile vanished completely. "I'd exercise caution with accusations, Donald, especially unfounded ones that could be construed as libelous." Her voice had lost all pretense of warmth. "Did you remove any company documents when you left? Because that would constitute theft." "I retained copies of my work product as permitted in the employee handbook," I replied truthfully. She abruptly stood. "I'll give you until tomorrow to reconsider the severance offer. After that, things may become complicated for your retirement planning." After she departed, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Back off if you value your well-being. We're aware of the USB drive." That evening, I noticed a vehicle parked across from my house. It remained there the following morning. By afternoon, my bank contacted me. Someone had attempted to access my accounts using my social security number and incorrect passwords. When I checked my email, my inbox was flooded with dozens of subscription confirmations for services I'd never subscribed to, all demanding immediate payment. The message was clear. They could make my life difficult, destroy my credit, and monitor my home. I called Richard again. "They're retaliating," I informed him, "aggressively." "As expected," he replied calmly, "but concerning. It suggests this goes beyond simple bookkeeping errors. Forward me everything: the severance offer, the text, the unauthorized access attempts, and document any surveillance." "What about my evidence? Is it sufficient?" His tone was cautious. "It's compelling, Donald, but corporations like Blackwood have armies of lawyers who will claim these are isolated incidents or accounting errors. We need more. We need an inside source." I hung up, feeling more isolated than ever. They were watching me, pressuring me, and I lacked sufficient ammunition to fight back. Not yet, anyway. A week after Julia's visit, I received a call from my former assistant, Susan. Her voice was hushed, anxious. "Can we meet somewhere? Not publicly, not at your home." We arranged to meet at my brother's cabin an hour outside of St. Louis. He was in Florida for the winter, and the place would be empty. Susan arrived, looking exhausted, constantly checking her rearview mirror as she pulled into the driveway. "They're conducting a full audit," she said without preamble once we were inside. "But it's not a legitimate audit. They're altering records, Donald, backdating approvals, creating fictitious paper trails. How do I know? They hired consultants from Mark's former firm. They're unaware I still have access to the system logs. I'm still using your old credentials." She produced a USB drive. "I've documented everything, the before and after." I stared at the tiny device. "You're jeopardizing your job. They're already planning to eliminate my position next month." Her laugh was bitter. "I discovered that when they accidentally copied me on the restructuring email." What Susan revealed went far beyond my initial suspicions. This wasn't just creative accounting or inflated executive perks. Blackwood had been systematically overcharging government contracts, falsifying certification documents for substandard parts, and recording phantom inventory to inflate the company's valuation. "There's more," Susan said, pulling up an email chain. "They're preparing to sell the manufacturing division to a private equity group. The employees won't know until it's finalized." "The pension fund?" Her expression confirmed my worst fears. "They've been raiding it for over a year. If the sale proceeds, there won't be enough to cover obligations. Hundreds of families, retirement plans built over decades, all at risk. Who else knows? Just the executive team, and now you." She hesitated. "And someone else, I think. William from Quality Control started asking questions last month. He vanished a week before you." "Fired?" "That's the strange part. There's no termination paperwork. His employee file indicates he resigned, but his security badge was never returned, and his desk was cleared out overnight." A chilling feeling settled in my stomach. "Have you heard from him?" "No, his phone goes straight to voicemail." On the drive home, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were dealing with something far more sinister than financial fraud. The surveillance vehicle was gone from my street upon my return, but that offered little reassurance. I called William's number, straight to voicemail, as Susan had stated. I left a vague message about potential professional opportunities. Then I called Richard again. "We need to expedite this," I told him, explaining Susan's revelations. "This changes everything," he agreed. "The pension fund angle elevates this significantly. I'll speak with my superiors tomorrow, but Donald," he paused, "be careful. If they're manipulating records on this scale, they're desperate. Desperate people make dangerous choices." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about William, about Frederick Blackwood, who had trusted me to maintain his company's financial integrity, about the machine operators and warehouse staff who had dedicated decades of service, relying on pensions that were being systematically plundered. At 2 a.m., my security system alerted me to movement in my backyard. By the time I reached the window, whoever it was had disappeared. But my home office window was slightly ajar. They weren't just observing anymore. They were sending another message. Nowhere was safe. I didn't wait for their next move. By dawn, I was executing a plan I'd been developing since Susan's revelations. First, I moved all my evidence, my documentation and Susan's, to 3 separate secure locations. One set went to Jessica with instructions to open it only if something happened to me. Another went into a safety deposit box at a bank beyond Julia's reach. The third I encrypted and sent to Richard with the decryption key delivered separately. Next, I contacted Robert from procurement, who had been dismissed months before me. We met at a diner in a neighboring town. "I've been anticipating this call," he said grimly after I explained the situation. I discovered the same discrepancies, started asking questions, and the next thing I knew, I was being escorted out for violating company policy. "Did they threaten you afterward?" "Not directly, but my home was burglarized a week later. Nothing valuable was taken, just my laptop and some files." He leaned forward. "I filed a police report, documented everything. Never thought it would be useful, but it establishes a pattern," I finished. "Would you be willing to give a statement?" He nodded without hesitation. "I've felt like a coward for remaining silent for so long." By afternoon, I had connected with 2 more former employees with similar stories. Each possessed pieces of the puzzle. Departments where figures didn't reconcile, reports that vanished from tracking systems, safety concerns that were suppressed. Richard called with news. The federal prosecutor's office was officially interested, but they needed more, especially concerning the pension fund manipulation. "We require current financial records," he said. "Without them, Blackwood's lawyers will claim the issues were resolved after you left." Susan was taking an enormous risk by even speaking to me. Getting her to extract more documents might put her in grave danger. That's when my phone rang, an unknown number. "Donald?" The voice was barely recognizable. "William?" I stepped outside the coffee shop where I'd been working, instinctively scanning my surroundings. "Where are you? Are you all right?" "Listen carefully." His words were hurried, filled with fear. "The Springfield contract. Compare the testing certification documents to the actual test results. They're installing defective parts in military vehicles. William, where—" "They threatened my family, said they'd target my children." His voice cracked. "I'm leaving town, but someone needs to stop them before someone is killed." The line went dead. Military contracts, defective parts. This was no longer just about money, it was about lives. I immediately called Richard, relaying William's information. His response was instantaneous. "This alters everything. I'm involving the Department of Defense. Can you come to my office now?" 3 hours later, I sat in a conference room with Richard and 2 stern-faced DOD investigators. I presented everything: the financial fraud, the document manipulation, the pension fund depletion, and now the military contract corruption. "We'll need your complete cooperation," one investigator stated. "This investigation will become highly public very rapidly. Your safety may be compromised. We can arrange protection." I shook my head. "I have a better idea." The following morning, I called Julia directly. "I've been reconsidering that severance package," I said, affecting a submissive, defeated tone. "I'd like to discuss the terms." "A wise decision," she replied, poorly concealing her satisfaction. "Come to the office tomorrow, 9 a.m. We'll finalize everything." "Actually," I countered, "I'd prefer a more neutral location. The Lakeside Hotel. They have private meeting rooms." She hesitated, then agreed. What she didn't know was that the Lakeside was already swarming with federal agents, rooms wired for recording, and every entrance under surveillance. The trap was set, and Julia was walking right into it. The Lakeside Hotel's Willow Room felt eerily quiet as Julia reviewed the paperwork I'd brought. Her attorney sat beside her, occasionally whispering in her ear. "This all appears to be in order," she finally said, sliding the non-disclosure agreement across the table. "Just sign here, and we can put this unfortunate situation behind us." I looked at the document, 12 pages of legal jargon designed to silence me forever. Beside it sat the severance check, 5-month salary for 19 years of service. "Before I sign," I said carefully, "I'd like to clarify something. This agreement covers all company matters, correct? Including the pension fund irregularities and the Springfield military contract?" The attorney stiffened. Julia's smile faltered momentarily. "All company matters," she confirmed smoothly, standard language. I nodded, reached for a pen, then paused. "One more question. Does this cover my obligation to report federal crimes I've witnessed?" "What are you implying?" The attorney leaned forward. "I'm not implying anything." I stood slowly. "I'm stating that I've already provided evidence of fraud, embezzlement, and criminal endangerment to federal authorities, including our conversation right now." On cue, the conference room door swung open. Richard entered, flanked by FBI agents and the DOD investigators. "Julia Stokes," one agent said, "we have a warrant to search all Blackwood Industries facilities and seize financial records related to government contracts." Her face drained of color as Richard placed a thick file on the table. "This is merely a fraction of what we possess," he stated quietly. "The remainder is being presented to a grand jury as we speak." Julia lunged for her phone, but an agent gently restrained her. Mark Evans and the CEO are currently being detained for questioning, he explained, along with several board members. I didn't linger to watch them lead Julia away. My role was complete. 6 months after the arrests at the Lakeside Hotel, I stood in the old Blackwood manufacturing facility, observing workers on the assembly line. The machines hummed with the same familiar rhythm, but everything else had changed. The company had been placed into receivership during the investigation. Afterward, a coalition of employees, with assistance from a state economic development fund, managed to acquire the manufacturing division. They renamed it Blackwood Legacy Manufacturing, and they asked me to help establish their new financial systems, transparent and accountable systems integrated at every level. All finished for the day, Mr. Thompson? Kevin, the security guard who had once escorted me out, now nodded respectfully as I signed out at the front desk. Almost, I replied, handing him back my visitor's badge. Outside, Jessica waited in her car. "How's it looking inside?" she asked as I settled into the passenger seat. "Good. They have a strong team. They'll manage without my oversight." I glanced back at the building. Frederick would be proud. We drove in comfortable silence for a time. The news had covered the story extensively. Executives arrested, charges filed, plea bargains negotiated. The pension funds had been partially recovered, not entirely, but enough to prevent most retirees from losing their homes. Julia and Mark were awaiting trial. The CEO had become a cooperating witness. The story had faded from the headlines, replaced by newer scandals. "Any regrets?" Jessica asked as we pulled up to my house. I considered the question carefully. "No," I finally answered. "I didn't do it for revenge. I did it because it was the right thing to do." That evening, I put away my files on Blackwood. The entire story was documented, preserved, but I no longer needed to carry that burden. Tomorrow, I was beginning a part-time role as a financial ethics consultant for a manufacturing association, assisting other companies in establishing systems that would make it more difficult for individuals like Julia and Mark to manipulate the books. Not a bad final chapter for a 65-year-old accountant who simply desired truth reflected in the numbers.